Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and today I'm looking back at Contra's very first outing. No, not the NES version, I covered that one already. I'm talking about the arcade version. This one was also developed by Konami and released in 1987, 1 year before the NES port showed up. Despite the NES version eventually becoming a cult classic as time went on, the same couldn't be said for the arcade version, which I only brought up in the very beginning of my NES review and nowhere else, because that conversation belongs here, in the arcade review. That's not to say it was a failure, as it was ultimately successful at the end of the day. Successful enough for the NES version to be made in the first place. But time has not been kind with the arcade version, as many people who first played the NES port are led to believe that's where the series started. And although it's a very faithful port, it ended up a way different game from the original. Said original being a whole different beast worth diving into. So grab your macho guns, and let's see if the arcade version still has what it takes to be Contra. The classic run-and-gun gameplay Contra is known for was originally established here, with a simple moveset of running, jumping, going low to the ground, and dropping down semi-solids. Our heroes, Bill Riser and Lance Bean, are blessed with futuristic rifles and encouraged to blow the brains out of anything that moves, including the classic running dudes, who think they're cool getting the drop on you as soon as you start playing. A unique trait in this game is the loose aiming that lets you hit enemies in nearly any kind of angle. It's different from the NES version's strict 8-directional aiming, and although I prefer that kind of aiming, loose aiming is fun to mess around with. When aiming at a 45-degree diagonal, you take a good while to actually reach that trajectory and stick to it. Although the game will expect more out of you because of this loose aiming, you can use it to your advantage to cover a lot more area without having to jump. Speaking of which, I really don't like how you jump in this game. Jumping is floaty, but in a way that makes it awkward to maneuver yourself around attacks if they come your way, because your character does not fully curl up into a cannonball. Instead, he flops around like a dead fish. It's funny at first, but ultimately a stupid animation that I try to avoid as much as possible. It even gives you an unreliable hitbox with how much you're boomeranging, which discourages jumping altogether. Another thing that bothers me is how shots are fixed to the camera and do not move with the stage. It's disorienting and breaks the immersion. It's very noticeable in the vertical waterfall stage, as shots basically travel with you as you jump. But also in the alien's lair. The enemies on the ceiling and floor are disposed of with diagonal shots, but even if you line them upright, the camera scrolling will push your shots out of the way and you'll miss. The game is designed with the vertical aspect ratio in mind, compared to the NES game's horizontal orientation. However, the vertical screen doesn't have any benefit, even in the vertical waterfall stage. All it does is make everything feel cramped by subtracting your field of vision. Most of the time playing, you will just be mindlessly shooting, because this smaller vision means enemies are much quicker at reaching you with body contact or gunshots. It's way less exciting when reactionary gameplay is discouraged, and by all rights, an arcade game should be more exciting. Bill Riser and Lance Bean are immediately recognizable from their appearance on the title screen, which shows Bill wearing a white tank top and Lance being shirtless. These, along with their hair and bandana colors, are actually kept intact when you play as them, giving the two their first distinct attire that would attribute Player 1 with the color of blue, with Player 2 the color of red. The whole two-player aspect of the game is what can really elevate the experience for many. To quote my NES review, having two players creates enough chaos to get newcomers invested in the game, but the way of progression still shakes things up for veterans, as you now have to take your extra buddy into account. It does have the same problem as the NES version, where you have to be really far on the right in order to make the camera scroll, but I think it's fine enough for what the arcade game sets out to do: create a hectic experience for both players regardless of the outcome. Graphically, the game has more detail overall, and guns even change design when collecting an upgrade. As for the stages, I like how some of them have some extra additions. In the jungle stage, the left of your starting area looks like a zipline pole that our heroes just finished using, and the mountains in the background are flashing as if they were reflecting the northern lights. The two base stages are high-tech corridors, whirring with colorful lights, and probably the most eye-catching aesthetic in the whole game. On the flip side, some graphics do look washed out in a bland way. It's very drab, and most other stage aesthetics are not going to wow you. The rest of the jungle stage has these ugly colors for the green of the trees, the gray of the rocks, or the blue and white of the water streams. The little waterfall isn't even animated here. The snowfield has barely anything going on for it other than just looking like a white jungle, and the waterfall stage has a very lousy palette. Thankfully, the OST is still very nice to hear, despite the techno approach taking a bit to get used to. Even though they may have a different key or tempo than usual, they're still catchy at the end of the day, and get a lot of support from the 80s tom-toms pumping you on all stereos. Some songs even get extra treatment, with the Energy Zone theme having an entire second half that was never brought over to the NES. It was only until Operation C on the Game Boy that this portion of the song was restored. The sound effects are also impactful with how they complement the non-stop action. In addition to the blastings of each weapon upgrade keeping you going, there's so many explosion sounds, going from the running dudes to the big bangs of defeated bosses. It's very satisfying to the ears. The main failure with the sound design is that the iconic stage clear theme only plays once in the entire game, where you beat the base 1 boss and your guy rides an elevator upwards. With every other stage, he simply enters the blown up hatch in the base, or leaves the screen as quickly as possible, so the game can immediately transition forward, hardly giving you time to breathe or celebrate your victory. The weapons you get in this game are pretty much the same as in the NES version, but here most of them are balanced very well in strength, and you feel a much more notable boost in firepower against the more tanky foes. M for Machine is especially good. It still keeps its perk of being auto-fire, but you can produce so many bullets at once. It works for both raw damage and spraying the whole screen with bullets. S for Spread is still the go-to for clearing whole screens of enemies, though I wouldn't consider it OP. Sure, I like to keep it across the whole game, but that's only because of the game's nuances that make it riskier to stick with others in the long run. Spread does pretty low damage if you aren't hitting all 5 bullets at once, so the beefier enemies and bosses will take quite a bit to dispatch. Still, it has the best screen coverage in the game. L for Laser is now the exact opposite of Spread, perfectly fine-tuned in being a high damage, high precision weapon. The laser itself is long, and has by far the best damage output in the game. Holy moly, it's borderline insane how well it destroys the beefier enemies and defenses. But the hitbox of the laser is very tiny, even tinier than the sprite. For the bosses that send out projectiles all over, laser struggles to protect you, but its damage should not be underestimated. Really, the only weapon that still sucks is F for Fire, at least compared to everything else you can use. Although it spins fast enough that running dudes can't walk through it, the speed of fire is too slow and restrictive for you to get any real millage in the long run. It's okay in covering a wide area, but Spread already does that, but better. And it's not pleasant to use in the pseudo 3D stages, where you have to keep repositioning yourself if your shots aren't hitting. Normally, you get weapons from flying capsules and wall-mounted sensors, and the sensors show up at a frequent enough rate that you can swiftly bounce back after a death costed you your current weapon. The flying weapon pods, however, only appear if you have the base rifle. It's guaranteed at the start of the game, but say, if you keep Spread throughout, you won't ever see them again. Even weirder is that because R for Rapid and B for Barrier are exclusive to these weapon pods, you may never get to use them. It especially sucks for Barrier as it has a unique animation of giving you these spinning barriers that protect you, with them eventually going away one by one, and they stick around for a good while too. Probably the biggest fumble overall is with the stage design. Area 1 is the jungle stage, and despite the location being advertised as the big selling point for the game, it's so short that you'll be in here for less than a minute, even on a first playthrough. There's many layers throughout that you could switch across, but they don't add anything, as the stage has this boring automated pace, worsened by the baffling implementation of its gimmicks. The one exploding bridge can actually kill you if you don't jump to avoid the first explosion, and the rest are too slow to catch up and make you jump a second time. The water itself is awkward. Although you can't jump inside it, it has this fluid animation of you going under the surface for cover, but you have no reason to use it. Even if you're unable to cross the bridge, you spend very little time inside the water, up until you reach land just after the bridge. No cannons to properly challenge you in water combat. What's more bizarre is that on the hardest difficulty of this game, very hard, there are enemies unique to this stage. They're these scuba soldiers who try to rush you from the water and come out to stab you. Thing is, they're easily killed. There are only 2 of them, they are very slow in attacking, and only appear before the bridge section, dying off immediately before anything else can be done with them. Why are they exclusive to very hard if they don't pose a threat whatsoever? Their swimming animation isn't even layered properly. I will say though, the pseudo 3D stages have a noticeable glow up in this version, as they have extra mechanics that make them more engaging and dynamic. You not only have a time limit to add a sense of urgency, but you also have to go left and right at the end of each room to continue the maze. While there is a map at the top of the screen to show your progress and what direction you need to move in, you can still tell where to go by looking at the depth of the walls for an opening. Although these mechanics ultimately come off as superfluous once you learn the game enough, it's still a nice way of amplifying the tension and immersion of these sections. Not just that, but the stages are much more fun overall, having a generally faster pace and giving the best kind of adrenaline. Honestly, these are my favorite parts of the game to go through. The little sensors can be destroyed in just a few seconds, but the cannons are more accurate in aiming, and the running dudes are much faster, sweeping across the room while spraying bullets or sending out their grenades and barrels. While you can still duck under most attacks, these enemies do have the capacity to flood the screen and force you to really improvise on your movements. The barrels in these sections suck though. They can explode in 2 instances, when they are shot down or despawning after you clear a room, but the despawn explosion actually has the capacity to kill you if it touches you, despite the depth perception having them in the background. It's really frustrating because it's not supposed to do that. These explosions aren't meant to be lethal, but you can die while standing still or having jumped next to the explosion. It's completely sudden when it happens, and it always ruins the mood. Area 3 is the Waterfall stage, and not only is it extremely short, but the misshapen layouts encourage you to just keep jumping constantly, letting you get halfway through the stage before the music can even finish its intro. The very first screen of this stage has 2 sniper dudes on an upper level next to a single bridge, just before it burns. The logical thing would be to spawn the player at the very bottom, so they have to fight the enemies and then jump over the fire before proceeding. Instead, you spawn on a platform right underneath the enemies, which lets you jump up to their level, kill them instantly, and avoid interacting with the bridge entirely. The 2 boulder spawners are also rendered completely moot, because they both cover the same vertical area and you have no reason to cross their path. Area 3 has 2 scuba enemies hiding inside the waterfall, and they can be extremely annoying unless you cheese them in a specific way. Their whole gimmick is when you get above, they pop out to attack, but that's when they can be shot. The thing is, they're completely invincible and cannot be killed. Shoot as many spreads as you want, but they will not die. It's so weird because they also appear in the snowfield stage, and they could be killed there, but not in the waterfall stage. And if you try and take them out, they will never stop attacking, blocking you off. The only way to reliably get around the first one's attack is to exploit a missing hitbox on the main projectile's explosion before it splits, by running through it. The Area 3 boss is the first boss I would consider frustrating. In addition to having running dude support, all of the cannons are at the middle of the screen. The side cannons are aiming at you constantly, and the main one releases a large 5-way spread that you cannot react to. You just have to know where to stand, on top of avoiding the side cannons. You pretty much have to destroy one of the side cannons as soon as you initiate the fight to ease your troubles. But even when knowing what to do, it's very difficult not to get shot, and if you don't end up destroying the first side cannon right away, you're screwed. It doesn't help that the design of this boss is way less interesting than what the NES version cooked up. Instead of this outstanding alien monster that flail its tentacle arms around, you have this generic structure that could be in any game, somehow feeling less grand than the first boss, a freaking wall no less. The Area 4 boss is also one that's ludicrous, and you can tell it was specifically designed this way to eat up as many quarters as possible. The first part isn't so bad despite the large number of enemies. It's still manageable, but once the real boss shows up, this is where things spike up in difficulty. Each of the two robots are very tanky, which doesn't complement their ability to split into phantom images. So not only do you have a much longer fight than usual, the mutated bubbles are fired randomly and basically have a mind of their own. Depending on their initial trajectory, they may either wander off harmlessly or launch at a random time frame after slowing to a halt. The worst part is when one of the robots is destroyed, the other can start spamming 5 to 10 bubbles every second with no rhyme or reason, basically nutting all over you. This is also random, and even Spread can barely take them all out. It's completely unfair and tedious, only stopping if you are killed by it, and even then, you might die a second time from the post-nut clarity that is these bubbles sticking around. After the Area 4 boss, the game does something strange for its final stage, in that it's actually a gauntlet of you going through the next 4 areas seamlessly. These include the snowfield, the energy zone, the hangar, and the alien's lair, but unfortunately, mixing all these stages into one large stage has no benefit, and they really suffer from it. The snowfield stage has only 2 napalm bombs being thrown from the trees at the beginning, and are not used anywhere else, while the alien's lair is completely flat. Both of these problems are fixed with the gimmicks and geometry in the energy zone and hangar, but with the way the traps are placed throughout, there's no reason not to take the same path through them every time. The biggest problem is that the first 3 areas are missing proper bosses, because the ones you remember from the NES version are instead placed haphazardly around the stages as mid-bosses, but they have so little health they die off in a few seconds. Thus, the mentality of looking forward to something on a similar scale as the earlier bosses is dropped halfway through the game. It doesn't help that these areas become mindless with how you go through them. At this point, running dudes gain the capacity to shoot while moving, but all enemy bullets are now much faster than they were in the jungle stage. Instead of being reactable, they are so fast, you're pretty much getting hit right as the projectile spawns. As such, you're expected to be shooting constantly to minimize any chances of running dudes or sniper dudes firing their weapons, and it can be very frustrating if you stop for just 1 second. It happens a lot. 1 second is enough for a random running dude to surprise kill you right then and there. Area 8 drops the running dudes, but its 2 bosses spam enemies everywhere and flood the screen. So much so that it's basically a spread check. I do like the detail of the first few seconds being empty to go with the music, but once you reach Java, you are immediately hit with enemies coming in from every possible angle. They're random and really fast too, reaching within a single second if not killed. Not even Spread is guaranteed to save you if you can't aim at them in time. The final boss, being Java's heart, has even more support, with 8 spawners relentlessly producing enemies and projectiles. If you don't have a weapon like Spread, your safest way of fighting the boss is to crouch at the left and spam the lower spawners so you can have breathing room to shoot the heart diagonally. If you manage to get Spread, then the boss will just die instantly. Brilliant. Although it's kind of funny that you get 1,000,000 points for killing the final boss, and thus at least 13 lives from it, going for high scores is only really dictated by beating the game. You can't play past this point either, as the game just hits you with the game over after the credits. Of course, you could just farm off of running dudes forever as the side-scrolling stages don't have a time limit, but come on. It also bothers me that there's no story cutscenes in any capacity. Obviously, we know that Bill and Lance are Contra units taking down the Red Falcon organization, but there's no pizzazz to it. Yeah, there's the iconic title screen jingle, but that's pretty much it. When you beat the game, you just get swallowed by this fading black void as the credits come on. Did you even come out of there alive? Well, if the game doesn't care, then I probably shouldn't care about it either. So, in the end, I've come up with 12 pros and 19 cons. I was a bit surprised with the result, because I first thought this game was just okay and left it at that. It's still the core Contra experience, tying back to my thesis statement of the NES review. What you see is what you get. But only if Contra was a middle-of-the-road B-lister instead of something phenomenal. Even if the NES game never released, Contra Arcade's reputation wouldn't change, and it probably never will. The more I played it, the more frustrating jank I came across, along with the stage design being very bland and baffling. The pseudo 3D sections are definitely the best part of the game, but that's not where I spend most of my playtime. Instead, I'm either wallowing about why these stages are so short, or trying not to breathe while shooting constantly so I don't get surprise killed. So with that, I'm going to give Contra on the Arcade a rating of 4 out of 10, mediocre. And that's it for the review. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment if you have something to say. And as per usual, my Discord server DeMontropolis is in the description, so consider joining if you're new to the channel. Now, with the first 5 projects of the year complete, I have a good idea of what to do going forward. There's a few new games I'm ready to introduce to the channel, such as Dragon Warrior, which I managed to do a deathless run on, thank goodness. But the more prominent one to me now is Sonic the Hedgehog. That one I'm really excited to talk about, and it's a Sonic game after all, so a review is bound to stir up some attention. What specific kind of attention? I don't know, but one thing for certain is I want to put my best foot forward and deliver on a high quality video. So with that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.